when I was a kid, the Inuit people of the Arctic were dismissed as savages. And indeed, when the British first went to the Arctic, they took the Inuit to be savages. The Inuit took the British to be gods. What the British failed to understand is that there was no better sign of human genius than the ability to survive in a harsh environment on a technology that was limited to what you could make from the cold. The Inuit didn't fear the cold, they took advantage of it. The runners of their sleds were originally made of fish, 3 Arctic char frozen and wrapped in a caribou hide skin and then greased with the stomach content of the caribou. The Inuit didn't fear the cold, they took advantage of it. This photograph I took 250 kilometers out on the sea ice north of Igloolik in the Canadian Arctic. That night, the temperature dropped wind chill to minus 80 Celsius. These guys made an igloo, survived in a way that I could never have imagined, a people for whom blood on ice is not a sign of death, but an affirmation of life itself. And I've often told the story that I've always thought was apocryphal when I was narwhal hunting with these Inuit from northern Baffin Island. They told me a story of the dark days of Canadian history when we forced the Inuit into settlements in the 1950s to establish our sovereignty in the Arctic. And this man, Olayak's grandfather, refused to go into the settlement. And so, fearful for his life, the people took away all of his weapons and all of his tools. And so what did the old man do? He slipped outside into the Arctic night, pulled down his caribou hide and sealskin trousers, defecated into his hand, and as the feces began to freeze, he shaped it in the form of a blade. As the implement made from human waste took final form, he put a spray of saliva along the leading edge, and when the shit knife, as it's known, was finally created from the cold, he used it to kill a dog. He skinned the dog, improvised a harness with the skin of the dead dog, improvised a sled from the rib cage of the dead dog, harnessed up an adjacent living dog, and shit knife and belt disappeared in the Arctic night. Now, when you talk about getting by with nothing, but I thought that was apocryphal until I read in the journals of Peter Freuchen, who was with Rasmussen on the 5th Thule expedition, and Freuchen's out there in a blizzard, and to protect himself, he digs a trough in the snow, pulls his sled on top, and then becomes encased in ice in a coffin of his own making, and in a very offhanded way in his primary journal says, "I thought of making a shit knife, but I couldn't really maneuver." So, but the tragedy in all of this, finally, tonight, is that having endured so much, and in a way the Inuit are a symbol of cultural survival and adaptation, now they're confronting something that's beyond their capacity to control. This is a photograph taken in Qaanaaq, the northernmost community in the world in northwest Greenland. In the language of the polar Eskimo, the word sila means both weather and consciousness. And we flew from Igloolik with an Inuk friend of ours who had made the journey with his dogs to northwest Greenland. And as we crossed Smith Sound, it was March month, 12 degrees south of the North Pole, we noticed that Theo was looking out the window and he had begun to cry. And we couldn't figure out what was wrong. And of course the answer was he was looking down at open water where there should have been ice. And when we went hunting in northern Greenland, we had to use boats. And the season of the ice, which used to come in September and remain until July, now comes in November and is gone by March. So the way of life, in a sense, has been cut in half. And I think, in a way, if you look at the subtitle of this book, Why Ancient Wisdom Matters in the Modern World, you really only have to say 2 words: climate change. Not because we are somehow going to go back to a pre-industrial past or that any culture should be kept from the brilliance of modernity, but the very existence of different cultures and different ways of thinking puts the lie to those who say that we're on a train wreck to history. It shows the folly of those who say that we cannot change, as we know we must change the fundamental way we inhabit the planet. Because in the end, I think we need these multiple visions of these multiple cultures, because they're not only our collective heritage, they become part of our kind of naked geography of hope.